Good day, students, and welcome to IOL, Introduction to Educational Research. That is IER 31 for 2022. For students who are doing DPPE, DJPE, BESP, TSE. I am your tutor, Sauma Kanjengo. I can be contacted at 081 47 44 647. You can also email me at skadepakanjengo@gmail.com. You can contact me around or between 5 and 7. Sometimes I prefer that students send me a WhatsApp message. You can send it throughout the day, and then I'll be able to respond it to, after 5. This is an exam-based presentation for Introduction to Educational Research. As I said earlier, DPPE, DJPE, BESP, TSE for April and August 22 examinations. We wish you all the best in your studies. Be motivated and study hard for this course and achieve the qualification you have always wanted. There are set learning outcomes for this module. So upon completion of this module, you should be able to explain basic research concepts and characteristics. You should be able to discuss the characteristics of qualitative and quantitative research, explain the design and implementation of data gathering tools, explain techniques for data analysis, explain the components of a research proposal. So these are the main learning outcome for you. This is what you need to be able to do, or to be able to, you should be able to comprehend all this so that you can pass well your module. Dear students, I urge you to put in the effort and start preparing early for your examination. Remember, the saying goes that if you fail to plan earlier on, then you are also planning to fail. So I'm urging you, dear students, please start preparing early, be it for your assignments or for examinations. And also please put in the effort, put in all that you can so that you can pass well your course and your program. I'm urging you also earlier on that please avoid copying, because when you copy or when you plagiarize, then it means you do not understand the content that you are putting in your assignment. So please try to read, try to understand. When you find a paragraph and you find it interesting, I advise that you paraphrase instead of copying it as it is. Read the questions carefully. Double check that you uploaded the correct assignment. I've noticed that a number of students in 2021 uploaded blank assignments. So I'm urging you to double check that you're uploading the correct content. Please ensure the order of your question or your questions is correct. Your order should be correct. I cannot mark question 5 and then question 7 and question 1. So please make sure that your order is correct. Also, please, the length of your answers should be based upon the marks allocation for that question. So you should make sure that if the mark allocation is 5, then whatever that you are writing is worth 5. Now, let's move on to the content. There are certain concepts that you need to understand, to comprehend, and to be familiar with in educational research. Those concepts are like research. You should be able to, if someone asks you what is a research, you should be able to tell what research is. What do we mean by action research? What do we mean by research design? What do we mean by research hypothesis? What do we mean by qualitative research? What do we mean by data analysis? What do we mean by plagiarism? We keep saying students should not plagiarize. What does it mean? What do you mean by reliability and validity? What do we mean by surveys? What do we mean by epistemological dimension? What do we mean by research ethics? What do we mean by ethnography? What do we mean by methodology? What do we mean by empirical research? What do we mean by scientific knowledge? What do we mean by research proposal? What do we mean by quantitative research? What do we mean by mixed methods? What do we mean by theory, by research paradigm, literature review, ontological dimension, model, mean, mode, median? What do we mean by all these concepts? These are concepts that we normally use in educational research. Therefore, you need to familiarize yourself with them. You need to understand what they are for you to excel in this module. We are starting with the educational research paradigm. There are certain paradigms that underpin the educational research. These paradigms are like empirical paradigm. The empirical paradigm assumes that knowledge is external to us. It exists outside ourselves. So you as a researcher and the knowledge that you are seeking through your research are separate things. The quantitative researcher observes and describes reality which is out there. Then we have the interpretive paradigm, which mostly has a sociological perspective, whereby results are interpreted. So with the interpretive paradigm, the researcher interprets the meaning of their data. Then we have action research paradigm, which deals mostly with when a researcher is trying to improve their practice, or when there's a problem in their local settings, then the researcher will go out there and try to find solution to the problem. Then that is called, or that falls under action research paradigm. Apart from paradigms, you also need to understand the 5 dimensions of research by Merton. We have 5 of them. We have the sociological dimension, we have the epistemological dimension, we have the ontological dimension, we have a teleological dimension, we have methodological dimension. You need to know this dimension. For instance, the sociological dimension is concerned with who does the research, and with the context in which the research is conducted. This research is mostly conducted around society or around societal issues. Then we have epistemological dimension, which is concerned with the knowledge. And what is the relationship between knowledge and the knower, the person that has the knowledge? Then the ontological dimension is concerned with reality. What is the reality? Is the sky blue? Is it? Is that the reality? Teleological dimension is more of when a research is intentional and goal-directed, while the methodological dimension deals with methodological consideration in research. You know, when you are conducting a research, there are methods that you should use under either research design, under your methodology. There are methods that should be used. So this one deals with the methodological dimensions. Now, the research process must have the following characteristics. Number 1, it should be systematic. There should be certain logical sequence, like where do you start and where do you end. It should be empirical. It should be varied and verifiable. I should be able to look at your findings. Whatever you have come up with, I should be able to look at your findings. Or let's say I should be able to look at your data and come to the same findings that you have found. It should be rigorous, critical, and controlled. So all these words, systematic, empirical, varied, and verifiable, rigorous, critical, and controlled, those are characteristics. So you need to know them when you are preparing for your assignments, when you are preparing for your test, or generally just when you are studying, you need to comprehend them. And then we move on to designs. Remember, we have qualitative research and we have quantitative research. So here are the designs for qualitative research. If you are conducting a qualitative research, people are likely to ask you, really, qualitative research? Okay, what is your design? So we are curious to know, what is your design? Because under qualitative research, we have designs. that our research follows or that our research falls under. Your study can be a qualitative research, but you are following ethnographical, or sometimes we just say ethnography. What do we mean by ethnography? We mean you are writing about people. For instance, if you decide to go, you want to, for instance, say you want to research certain items or certain aspects or certain issues around a certain cultural group. You decide to go to Tsungwe to just to research. Perhaps you want to research the way they live, the way the people in Tsungwe, whatever you decide to research on, but it's around their culture, then that can be an ethnography research or ethnographical research. So it's when you carry a research whereby you are interested in describing the culture of a group of people. You can also decide that you want to do an action research whereby you will be focusing on finding a solution to a problem in that local setting. Or you can decide that your research, it's a qualitative research, but it has a historical research approach. Then it means you will be describing or you will be digging historical aspects or artifacts. You'll be looking at records, past information, so that you can draw your data from there. Or you can decide to do conceptual studies or surveys or a comparative study or a case study. It all depends now on what you want to research on and also your interest. Now we also have, our research are classified. We have classification of research types according to methodology. There is we classified it according to methodology or purpose, but today we are only talking about the classification according to methodology. It has there are two classifications according to methodology. We have the deductive research, and then we have the inductive research. Deductive research draw conclusion by applying rules or principles, that is logically moving from a general rule or principle to a specific solution. I gave a simple example that we usually use in philosophy, whereby we say all men are mortal, Tom is mortal. So for deductive research, that means that Tom is also mortal. Why? Because Tom is a man. So we are drawing conclusion by applying the rules. We also have inductive research, which we mostly use. It involves moving from a specific situation to a general conclusion or rule. So when you go out there and then you research and then you draw your conclusion from what you have researched. We have three major common purposes of research. We have the exploration research. This one is when you go out there to explore a topic or familiarize yourself with a certain topic. For instance, you are curious about the views of students, maybe on the subject you teach, say it's geography. So you can decide to conduct a research whereby you are exploring the views of geography students in grade 9. That one, what you are doing, you are conducting an exploration study. Then we have a description study. The description usually deals with statistics. So we are used to describe situation and events, but we mostly use it with statistics. So for instance, the common example that we usually use is the census. With our the ones that do surveys, they are currently in the field doing a pilot study. So what they will be doing, they will be conducting a descriptive research, because they will be interested to know how many people are in Namibia, how old are the people, what number of people do what. So it's mostly on numbers, it's descriptive. And then you can also decide to conduct an explanation. Or one of the reasons that people do research is because they want to explain why certain things happen the way they do. For instance, you are curious on why students at school A are failing a specific subject or are behaving the way they are behaving. So you can decide to do an explanation, or you can decide to research because you want an explanation, and then you'll be focusing on why. So then it means your research is trying to explain. Now, apart from that, we also have, as I mentioned earlier, we talk of qualitative research design and quantitative research design. Now, it's very important that you understand these two research design because they are the backbone of any research. Qualitative research design and quantitative research design. Now, you need to know both because anytime the setter can decide to ask about either qualitative or quantitative or ask you to compare the two. Now, if you are asked about qualitative research design, you only talk about qualitative research design. For instance, that seek to understand participants' experiences with a central phenomena, that the sample size is small, it's more narrative. Or you can, or if you ask about the quantitative, then you talk about how big the sample size is, how it's more on numbers and statistics and so forth. But when you are asked to compare qualitative and quantitative research designs, you need to look at the question carefully. A number of times, students fail to look at that question carefully. In most cases, we don't just say compare qualitative and quantitative research designs. We also give you specific elaborations, like specific things that we want you to elaborate on. So when you're asked to compare, always double check, are you comparing in general, or are you given ideas or instructions or elaboration, specific elaborations that you're supposed to use as you compare the two? So for instance, the setter might say, compare qualitative and quantitative research design with specific elaboration, such as form of data, which then means I expect you to draw something like a table, then you have form of data, then in one column you have qualitative, in the next column you have quantitative, then you tell me the form of data in qualitative and the form of data in quantitative. For instance, the form of data in qualitative is narrative. So I want you to tell me that it's narrative, it's this, and then in quantitative you tell me it's statistics, it's this and that. So always check and double read, what is it that the question is asking you to do? Does the question expect you only to give general characteristic of qualitative research design or general characteristic of quantitative research design? Or is the question asking you to compare the two? If you are comparing the two, are you guided on specific elaborations that you have to use? If so, what are those? What are those that you are given? And then you should respond according to what you are given. And then when you are conducting your research, you might decide to use a questionnaire. Now, if you are using a questionnaire, we want to make sure that your questionnaire is testing exactly what you want to test. Therefore, before you go in the field and give your questionnaire to a person, the questionnaire needs to be evaluated, just to ensure that the questionnaire is useful and that it is asking or testing what you want to find out. Now, there are 9 principles. You need to read them on your own. I have only highlighted 5 principles that are used when one is evaluating a designed questionnaire. So first you need to design it before it can be evaluated. One of the principles is that the questionnaire should match the research objectives. For instance, if you are going you are exploring views of teachers at a certain school, maybe about the failure at school, you cannot have a questionnaire that's asking about the ocean or about the sun. So your questionnaire should match the research objectives. What exactly is your research about? What is it that you want to find out? And then what you want to find out is what you put in your questionnaire. You need also to understand your research participants. Yes, you do. Who are you designing the questionnaire for? If you are designing a questionnaire for all members of the community, how are you expecting them to answer it? So you need to think carefully. Who is going to answer my questionnaire? Is my target member or my target participants able to read and write? Can they read what you have written? Will they be able to write? You also need to make sure that you use natural and familiar language. You cannot go in, let me say, in a certain community where they speak a certain language, and then you bring your questionnaire written in another language and expect them to answer. So you have to make sure that you use the language that they know and the language that they can respond to. You must also make sure that you don't use complicated vocabulary, because if they don't understand, they are going to skip the questions. So you should also make sure that you write items that are clear, precise, and relatively short. People do not have time to read a 20-paper or 20-page questionnaire. So make sure your questionnaire is short, clear, and precise. And do not use reading or loaded questions. So there are many principles. Please read through and try to comprehend all of them. We talk of questionnaire. Apart from questionnaire, we also have interviews. One can decide to conduct data using interviews. Now, you need to make sure that the person that you are interviewing is the holder of the information that you are seeking. What do I mean? For instance, if you are conducting research on, say it's based on education, or maybe it's about how teachers behave in a specific school, you cannot go and ask people who don't walk or work around the teaching community. So you need to make sure that the people that you are asking are the holder of the information. You cannot give the questionnaire to teachers when what you want to ask is health related and can be answered by the nurses. You should always make it clear to the person being interviewed what the aim of the interview is and what information you want to gather from them. So you can read all this in your modules. It's there. I know there are many of them. The keys are many. So go through them and read them. And then we talk of questionnaire, we've talked of interview. We can also correct data using documents. Yes, we can. What do we mean? When you use documents as data gathering method, you focus on all types of written communication that may shed light on the phenomenon that you are investigating. So you get data from primary sources and secondary sources. The primary sources are usually, for instance, reports. If you are investigating something at a school, then the reports, the school reports, the minutes, the documents, things that are written, if they have calendars of activities and all that, that's what you look at. While the secondary sources, we are referring to articles, mostly published articles, or textbooks. Those are secondary sources of information. This one I was supposed to touch it when I was talking about questionnaire. It's about pilot testing questionnaire. So when you set your questionnaire, remember we mentioned that you evaluate it to see whether it fits. Apart from evaluating to see whether it fits, you also need to pilot it. It's not only questionnaire, even interview questions can be piloted. Now, the reason we pilot is we want to find out whether the instrument that you are using, be it the questionnaire or the interview, whatever that you are using, whether it operates properly. You want to find out whether the questions, if, for instance, if you are asking questions, or you have a questionnaire or you are interviewing, you want to make sure that what people are answering is in line with what you are testing. So you go out there, for instance, say you are conducting research in a specific school. you want to find out why students are failing English at a specific school, then before you give out your questionnaire to all the participants in the study, you first need to pilot test those questions, which means you will give them to English students, maybe just 5, just to see how they will respond. How they will respond will tell you whether your questions are clear, or maybe your questions are ambiguous and students are not getting them properly. If or should it occur to you that the questions are not clear, or they are ambiguous, or this or that, then you correct all those errors before you conduct the actual research. That's by giving the questionnaire to students. There are many other ways, so just go through them. Please read them carefully. And then after you have gone out there, now you have your research in front of you. You now have to code your data. What do we mean by coding your data? Coding is the organization of raw data. That is now the information that you get from the field is called raw data. When you go with your questionnaire or go with your interview, you interview and you have their responses. Now all these responses that you have is what we are referring to as raw data. So now you need to code the raw data that you got into conceptual categories, because you need to make sense of what they are saying. There are stages of coding. I think there are 4 or so. Please familiarize yourself with them. You need to know them. Now that you have your data also in front of you, we also need to see whether your data is trustworthy. How will we know that your data is trustworthy? The data is trustworthy when you have given it to the member to check it. Who is the member? The member is the person that you draw your data from. So if you have interviewed students and you have responses of what they have said, you can now give what you have written as responses to students, back to the student that you interviewed or that wrote the questionnaire, and say, this is how I understand what you have written. Is this what you said? Then the student will say no or yes. If they say no, then you ask them, what is it that you meant, so that you can correct your data. If they say yes, that's also perfect. So your final data will be considered trustworthy because it was member checked. There are also other methods to ensure trustworthy. People also use what we call triangulation. Please find out what we mean by triangulation. Yes, find out what it means. And so many other ways. Then we have a t-test, which is one of the most statistical significance tests for independent samples. The t-test is used when 2 independent groups need to be compared based on their average score on a quantitative variable. For example, average IQ males and females. You need to read more on t-test, read more on it on your own. Now, you being a tertiary student, you need to critically get engaged, critically read, critically engaged, or get engaged with text. What does that mean? Or what does it involve? It involves a lot of things. I think there are 10 of them, but I've only mentioned 2 there. It entails giving a clear exposition of the argument. It entails determining and assessing the support for a certain claim you or others have made in order to get a clear understanding of an issue. It involves a lot of things. Please read on them. Try to have an understanding of them. And then we move on to ethical consideration in research process. Now, when you are conducting a research, be it an educational research or any other research for that matter, there are a lot of ethical consideration you have to bear in mind. Or research ethics that you have to, sometimes they say ethical consideration, sometimes they talk of research ethics, they are talking of one and the same thing. Now, the first thing is when you are going to conduct a research at a certain, say at a certain school, you need to get consent. Normally in our situation in Namibia, if you are conducting a research at a school in Ochivarongo, you first need to write a letter to the director of education in Ochivarongo. Sometimes you might even need to write a letter to the PS. The PS, and then the director, then the principal, they all need to give you consent or permission to go into a school for you to conduct that research. And then when you get now this consent or this permission, that's when then you go into the school. And again, when you go in the school, you cannot say, I got a permission from the deputy executive director and here what, no. You still need to seek consent from the participants themselves. If your participants are teachers, then you ask the teachers to give you tell them, this is who I am, this is what I'm researching on, please can I interview you? Then the person will say yes or no. When they say yes, you give them something to sign so that they give you written consent. If you want to interview students, or if you want to interview students or you want to give students your questionnaire, again, you need their consent. Student consent, if the student is 18 and above, the student can, he or herself, give you permission. If the student is underage, then you need to get consent from their parents because they are underage, yes. So they cannot give you that consent. The parents have to give you the consent. So you need to obtain informed consent. That's now from the institution as well as from their potential research participants. It's your duty as a researcher to make sure that you minimize the risk of harm to participants. There are a lot of, I think there are 5 ethics in your study guide. So please read on them and try to understand them. And then we are moving to sampling. Now, how do you determine who you will be interviewing for your study? We have what we call probability and non-probability methods of sampling. Sampling is when you take a small number of people from the mass population. So now, read on sampling also so that you have an understanding of what you mean by sampling. I'm only going to talk about 4 main types of non-probability sampling. They are also in your study guide. If they are not there, read on them, read as widely as you can. We have purposive sampling, we have quota sampling, we have snowball sampling, and we have convenience sampling. Convenience sampling is when you decide who to interview based on your convenience. For instance, you stay in I'm trying to find a town that I haven't mentioned. You stay in Enana and you want to research on failure of students in Ohangwena region. Maybe their failure in English. So instead of going to all schools in Ohangwena, you can decide to go to a school that's in Enana so that you don't travel a long distance. So you can pick a school that's located in Enana that has a grade that you want, then you just go there and pick people to do the interview or to do the questionnaire. So you have used convenience sampling. You are choosing based on your convenience. Sometimes you can decide to do snowball sampling, or you are interviewing students on, maybe you want to interview children that are heading homes. But because you don't know them, when you interview the first student, you can ask the student to refer you to another one or to another child that's heading home. This child will refer you to another one. This child will refer you to another one. So these children will be referring you to other children that you are using snowball sampling. Read on quota sampling and purposive sampling as well. Yes, now we have our data, we have it there in front, it's in front of us now. What do we do? Or before we say what do we do, what do we mean by data analysis? We have our data, we need to analyze it. What do we mean by data analysis? Data analysis is a process under which a researcher begins with a large body of information and must go through inductive reasoning, sort and categorize it, and gradually boil it down to a small set of abstracts, underlying themes. Yes. Imagine you are conducting a certain study on fail, as we say, for fail. Maybe you are looking at why students are failing English in Wangwena region. And then you specifically picked a school, a Nana primary school. So now you give questionnaire to all the grade 10 or grade 11 in a Nana primary school. Maybe you have 200 learners. Now you have this large body of information and you need to make sense of it. So now you use data analysis to go through all that material so that you boil it down to small sets that are meaningful. So that students can be able to make sense, or other readers can be able to make sense of what you are or what you have studied. We also have, let me go back. We transcribe data. Qualitative data is transcribed differently from quantitative data. So please read how we transcribe data qualitatively and how we transcribe data quantitatively. We have, when you correct your data can be qualitative, that when you have narratives and so forth, or it can be quantitative when it is numbers and so forth. The way we transcribe data, qualitative data, is different to the way we transcribe quantitative data. So please read on that. Then descriptive statistics and inferential statistics, please read on them. The term descriptive statistic is a corrective name of a number of statistical methods that are used to organize and summarize data in a meaningful way, while inferential statistics, please read on that. Different scales for use in questionnaires. Yes, we have scales. We have nominal scale, we have ordinary scales, we have interval scale, we have ratio scale. Please read on them and you should be able to give examples as well. Then research. This one is a research component from orientation to references. Remember, if you go back to our exit, if you go back to what is it that we need to learn from this program, it says explain components of a research proposal. Components of a research proposal. So what it means here, when we ask of research components, you need to understand, are we asking research components of the research itself or research components of a proposal? A proposal is just a plan that you are going to conduct a study, where, and so forth. So your research component, or research component of a proposal, are a little bit different from the research component of the main research. The proposal only have orientation to research problem, rationale, objective of the study, statement of the purpose, research problem, literature review, methodology, that's it. While the research itself, it has all that, plus presentation of findings and discussion of findings. So the presentation of findings and discussion of findings cannot be placed in a research proposal, because a research proposal is only a plan of what you are going to do. A research proposal is a plan of what you are going to do. You have a research topic, you want to research on why students are failing at a certain school, then you will write a plan. Your plan then includes orientation, rationale, and so forth and so forth. That one is just a plan of what you are going to do. While the research itself, you will write it after you have corrected your data. Then you write the whole research. So you will turn your proposal into a research. Then you will tell the reader what you have done. So please, when you're writing a research proposal, we don't expect you to tell us presentation of findings as well as discussion of findings. Because a proposal, you haven't gone out there yet. You've only proposed what you're going to do. Unfortunately, I cannot put all the components on the presentation. So if you look at the presentation, you'll find that sometimes I've only put two or three things, when in your study guide you have 10 things. So please go through your study guide carefully, read through your study guide carefully, go into the previous videos, YouTube videos, so that you can get ideas as well, and explore and read widely. And again, marks allocation should guide you on the quantity required. If you write one item where the question is asking for 5 items, you lose marks because you only get 1 mark. So please make sure that whatever you write is equivalent to the marks that are allocated to that question. Avoid plagiarism. I mentioned this before. You will lose marks unnecessarily. You don't copy a paragraph and paste it in your assignment. If you feel that the paragraph is saying what you want to put in your assignment, then please rephrase the paragraph. Not a paragraph even. Rephrase the words and write something that's coming entirely from you. All the best for exams. Please seek assistance earlier on. I know distance learning is challenging because you can be wherever you are alone on an island. Please contact other students, be in touch with other students. Ask as much as you can. Participate in your WhatsApp group or whatever group learning groups that you have, in your community of learning group, and seek help. Don't just stand alone, sit alone, stay alone wherever you are located. Seek help from others. And please start your assignment early. Good luck, and I wish you all the best.